Hello and welcome. So we've decided that maybe lunch hour is half an hour delayed on a Monday because there's so much of work to be done. So we thought we'll disturb you now. And because we are pests who will not go away on a Monday and leave you alone. So I'm just joking. I know that a lot of you see this later on, and thank you so much for your comments on the way in which we are doing our live. And hopefully, we will continue to provide value. It's not necessary that just because we are going live, you need to see us then. And clearly, you're already following my advice. So I'm not going to pay too much attention to this. All right. So today, Janvi, what are we talking about?
We're talking about how the fintech companies, especially in India, are going away from the investment and the IPO route and towards more mergers and acquisition route. So, just to set the context, the Indian fintechs they saw 10 exits in the last year, and all
Hmm.
of them they were through mergers or acquisitions. So, around that was marking an increase of around 67% year on year, right? And at the same time, parallelly, the overall funding for startups has reduced by 35% year on year. But now, here is a caveat. Even though the overall funding has reduced, the funding for the late stage startups has increased by 47% from
Hmm.
the previous quarter. So
Hmm.
that is a brilliant twist where where investors are not going towards the early stage startups, where we are seeing an era where there won't be a lot of buzz around companies like Cred, who are just building on top of customer acquisitions and spending a lot on the marketing budgets. But the companies that actually have a very robust monetization GTM policies, where they can where they won't just be burning the money but actually sustaining their models. And now these acquisitions are happening either to collaborate with the companies who already have the assets that these companies don't have, to have a robust, again, the GTM strategy for them, or the route to market, the companies that might have a stronghold into the market. So there the acquisitions are very very strategic and not just buyouts.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So here's my 2 cents to start this conversation. I feel that I'm not too sure whether this is a permanent shift towards profitability and towards more robust business models. And I'd love your take on it. The reason why I'm saying so is because most of these investments come in cycles. So normally at the start of any bubble or any growth sort of situation, what we see is people investing in ideas and people investing in the early stage startups based upon their potential to grow big and stuff like that. So that's when the heavy hitting and the big bets happen, right? And then over a period of time, some sort of consolidation happens. And I suppose we are maybe reaching the end of the cycle as far as investment is concerned. So these investments that you're seeing in late stage startups might be follow on investments, maybe not fresh investments.
Yeah.
Made by the same investor to make sure that they run across the line. So there is a possibility of that sort of thing, that sort of action happening. It is, although what you're saying, I wish that that was true, but I'm not too sure about it being really the case. Like, is this like a permanent shift towards more profitability and less hoo-ha?
Interesting take. One thing I think, obviously, the market sentiment is exploiting this entire scenario, right? In the last few years, we have seen a lot of NPAs increasing. We have seen banks going out or under scrutiny. RBI has made very stringent policies regarding IPOs. So, completely agree. It could be just a bubble, the end of a bubble coming in. But what I'm seeing is that if you take any industry, right? So the investments are more going towards a strategic investment. Companies, the early stage startups are going more towards bootstrapping because they're not getting investments.
Hmm.
So investors themselves are getting very very cautious because, number one, there isn't unlimited amounts coming in the way they were in 2015, 2019.
Yeah.
We are seeing a global economic recession,
Yes.
and investors, they have lost a lot of money in in the volatile markets in the last few years. And most of the companies that we have seen, most of the startups that evolved in 2018-19 era, they are either exiting, or they are seeing lack of profitability, reaching their ending growth. Even these startups are moving more towards how to monetize, how to retain your customers. The marketing strategy in the last few months, all that I have been hearing is how to increase retention rather than how to increase your acquisition. Even the performance marketers are working in that situation. So all of this makes me think that we are more moving towards, you have a certain set of consumers, you have a certain market, either increase your market penetrability, penetration, or how to monetize those existing customer base rather than just spending tons of amount of money to acquire new customers.
One of the things, I mean, this is a very nice friend of mine, Kaushik Subramaniam, an ex-Micon, who's a VC right now, and he's written a really interesting note about investments. And I would recommend anybody on LinkedIn to read that note and to follow Kaushik, because he doesn't post very often, but when he posts, he posts a lot of sense. He's done, by the way, a double MBA from Mica as well as INSEAD. So and then he's worked with Meta, and then he's gone into Stripe, if I'm not mistaken, and then gone into. So he's been in the execution side, and then he's become a VC. Is what I'm saying. Now the interesting thing that he's one of the points that he's mentioned is that most, if you make an investment, right, you have to make more investments in the bets that you have made. There is no point as a VC to make an investment in an early stage startup and then withdraw, unless and until it's a complete fraud or it's a complete no-no or whatever,
Yeah.
because your multiples and the way in which you actually increase in profitability is only if you keep investing. So it's quite likely that I would love to know two questions, Janavi, maybe I have for you, if or maybe we can find this out. One is, how many of them have been existing investors who have invested in these late startups? Because that is absolutely critical for us to know whether this is a cycle or whether
Yeah.
this is a permanent thing. And the second is the fintech sector the only sector here, or are there other sectors who are also getting into the acquisition mode and the survival and scrimping and trying for profitability mode? Because that will also tell us whether, this is just for one stream which requires a lot of cash, cash burn or whatever at the start, or is it just a part of the cycle, right? So I'm just trying to understand, from a data perspective. What do you think?
So, as for the first question, I'll have to find out.
Yeah.
I saw the number of the kind of investors that were coming in. I'm not sure if these were the investors who had invested in the same
Mm.
company.
Mm.
But again, companies like Small Case
Yeah.
and Patanjali Ayurved. So these companies, they saw fresh investments coming in. Now,
Yeah.
again, I'll also have to check on this. So let's check on this and
Yeah. No,
increase our comment engagement.
yeah. So you see the point that I'm making, right? Because then it becomes because normally what happens is that a rising tide raises all boats, right? And
Yeah.
typically, whenever there's been an investment, like if there's a lot of finance bros who were very happy when the fintech sector was going on well, and it's been investing, it's been recruiting, it's been hiring from a lot of places. Now, what the only point that I wanted to maybe figure out is there a you said a really interesting word. It is not failing, it is filtering, right?
Yeah.
That's what you told me before we did our podcast today. So what do you mean by that? What do you mean by failing and not filtering? Maybe we can end with that.
Yeah, so what I meant was markets are not failing in the sense, it's not that companies are losing faith in IPOs, or the investors are losing faith in the in the startup ecosystem. I think it's they're filtering out in such a way that there was a lot of rush of startups. Like every person on the nook and cranny was building a startup of their
Mm.
own,
Mm.
right, in the last 4 5 years. Now the investors have gotten very smart on figuring out what kind of startups will actually show them profitability, not just in the first 1 year. Like
Yeah.
earlier it used to be that investors or the angel investors or VCs, they wanted quick profitability.
Yeah.
Right, give me profit in 1 year. I want to exit soon enough. And the companies are also going with this mentality that I need to exit within 5 years so that
Correct.
I can make big bucks out of it. Now companies are moving towards creating legacy companies,
Mm.
and we are seeing companies like Blinkit, Zomato, Zerodha. These are the future legacy companies
Yes.
of tomorrow, and investors are not losing faith in these companies.
Yeah.
right? So they are filtering out in such a way that they are trying to understand, okay, I know that you have a startup, this is a very interesting space, there might be competition, or it might be a blue ocean, but I want to understand what are your 10-year plans.
Mm.
How much profitability will you give me in the next 10 to 20 years, or what are the chances of you becoming a next HUL or a L'Oreal?
So Janavi is proposing some sense and sensibility that has come in into the fintech sector by filtering and not failing. I, on the other hand, remain skeptical because I think it's just part of the cycle that VCs go through. I think we should get more data, Janavi, and maybe do a part two of this and figure out
Yeah,
whether it is a spin or it's reality, right? Okay. On that happy note, happy Monday, people. Happy Monday. Enjoy yourselves.
I don't think anybody ever says happy Monday.